So, you're thinking about moving to New Orleans. Well, in this video, we're going to cover all the reasons you might want to think twice about that.
I'm Juanita Walmsley.
And I'm Jason Edwards.
With RETV, powered by EXP, and whether you're coming or going, we want to bring you home. Reach out to us with the link down below. Hey!
Hello.
So, top, I don't know how many reasons you should not live in New Orleans. Number one, the weather. And we know that you don't have to live in New Orleans to understand we have a lot of hurricanes. That's the national news. But what's not so national news is the heat, the humid heat.
Yeah, it is so humid some days that literally from walking from your house to your car, you're drenched in sweat.
Like you feel like you have, I call it the NOLA film, like you have an extra layer of just, yeah, it's like a film. It's really good for your skin. It really is, because you want moisture on your skin, but it can be really heavy, like physically heavy. The sun and the water, you know, the humidity, it's just like, it can pack on the pressure.
And with that, I mean, we talked about the hurricanes a little bit, but also just the rain in general. Every single day, it seems like at some point it's going to rain. It lasts for maybe 15 minutes, an hour, and then it's gone and it's sunshine again, but you can count on rain almost every day.
Right, yeah. You should come here, open an umbrella business. Literally, like, you will do really well. But really, with the rain, what was I going to say about the rain? There was something when you said rain. Lightning. Like, I'm talking epic lightning, like movie lightning. Where if you have big windows, which if you live in New Orleans, most likely you're going to have these beautiful, large windows. And you just look outside, and sometimes it's unbelievable. Like, the lightning is just, it's really beautiful, but it's also really scary.
And it rarely, in the winter time, it does get cold. It does get really cold for maybe a month or so, but we rarely have snow. There is some ice at some points, but for the most part, it's either really hot or or a little bit cold.
And you'll hate it. Like, if you moved in the summer, you'd be like, what did I do? Like, the worst decision ever. But I guarantee you, by fall, when fall comes around, you're going to be like, I love New Orleans. It was just playing. This is great. Because fall, I mean, there's nowhere better to be. In fall, I mean, it's football and the weather feels good. And New Orleans is such a social city, you know, and you're just outside walking around. It's beautiful. You definitely want to at least hang out until the fall, because you'll be like, okay, yeah, this is good. Well, okay, this goes with weather, because you know about the hurricanes. The thing about hurricanes, though, is we know they're going to happen, you know, and there's a lot of warning, and you have time. Just always, if you can, and you have the privilege, evacuate and do it early, you know, because why? Like, why wait in line for gas? Why stand in traffic? You know, and decide if you can go and you have that privilege, just always go early.
There are a lot of times where you'll hear your neighbor saying, oh, no, I'm going to stick it out or whatever. And that's sometimes a risk that pays off, because you stay there and nothing happens. It's a little bit of rain and it was a bunch of news for nothing. But sometimes what happens is you stick it out and then you have no power and no way to get out of the city and no services and no food for a while. It's a really stressful time. And not to mention damage to a property or things that are even worse. So
right.
I recommend getting out almost every time. That if it's going to be more than a category 2, I would leave. Yeah.
Well, if you see it out there just swirling around and they're like, oh, it's a 2, it's probably going to be a 2, just go on and go. Just go on and go. A 2 is bad enough. And it just depends on you, you know, like you might like not having internet and electricity, but just remember, you're going to be in New Orleans in that heat and that water, the humidity with no electricity. It's brutal. So
the good thing is, as you said, you get to see it coming. I lived in California for a long time, where an earthquake is like instant, or even a tornado. You know, at least with hurricanes, you can see a few days ahead that you need to start making plans. So
yeah, but okay, so this goes with it. Okay, flooding. Like New Orleans, Louisiana, it's flat. So flooding is a huge issue because it's not just like, oh, here's a big flood going to happen. If it rains on most streets in New Orleans, it's gonna flood. And you can have a worse street than someone else. But your street, I mean, when I say flood, it's like you have to be pretty careful.
Yeah, literally, I mean, New Orleans is below sea level, so it's prone to flooding even more than other cities. But it also has a pump system where they start draining the water as soon as it starts raining. Sometimes those mechanical things fail. I had a time where my car literally, within a matter of 30 minutes, the water rose so much that it filled the bottom of my car with water. So it can happen very quickly. So just be mindful of that and know what street you're living on, and know, as she said, it's sometimes prone to flood more than other streets. So you'll know if the neighbors say this street floods, that you need to be getting your car to higher ground.
Right. And one perk, I guess, if you like clothes, you'll get to wear all of your wardrobe in one day in New Orleans. You know, it might start off a little cool, and then it's hot, and then it's raining. And so, you know, just trying to give you the little silver lining.
Yeah.
Something that kind of coincides with the flooding are potholes. And I'm talking about, like, you don't know what a pothole is until you move and live in New Orleans, because you can have baptism in these potholes. It's for real.
It's like literally there are some holes that you could drop your whole car into. And if it rains and if it fills up with rain, you don't know if it's a little baby pothole or a gigantic lose your car pothole. So it's not fun, but that's just something you deal with New Orleans and the old streets. And
a lot of the streets are narrow.
Yeah.
So if it's a huge pothole, it's not like you can get around it. You know, part of your car is going in, so you better tread really lightly.
When I first moved to New Orleans, I said, am I going to have to get like a gigantic truck to live in this city? Because
you need a Jeep.
Little cars, you're going to definitely lose some tires.
Yeah, don't bring your nice car to New Orleans, okay? Just don't do it. Like, I mean, you might have a nice car, just learn your path. But seriously, a lot of people bike, you know, so you're also dodging the potholes and the bicycle, you know, path, and it's just, yeah. But potholes, yeah, they're a real thing, and there's nothing we can do about it. We can fill them back up, but, you know, the plates are shifting constantly underneath, and we're below sea level, so it's just, you know, maybe bring some soil and plant a garden.
Just rolling into the potholes is also just local government issues. That also pertains to hurricane recovery, and it also pertains to potholes and other things. When disasters happen or when there's things going wrong in the city,
slow moving, baby.
It definitely takes a while to get things fixed, if they ever do get fixed.
It's so true. Like, there were years after Katrina where it was like, oh, well, there's no street sign there because it was like, you know, after Katrina. But it would be like 5 years later or something, you know. So, and it's not, I don't know where you're moving from, but if you're used to like a master planned community, very little of that. I mean, it's super, super authentic here, and you have to really be patient. You know, that's another thing that we had on there with the government. It's not just the government or the city. Politics is really, you know, it's a pain because, I mean, Louisiana is known for their, what's the word?
Sometimes some corruption
corrupt.
in the
when I was taking Louisiana history in school, what we learned was the Louisiana corruption. Like, that's what you learned about. It's a big part of our history, and, you know, as much progress as we can continue to make, it's still a thing. Just so you know, I mean, it's just slow moving. The whole city is slow moving. So if you're from somewhere like New York City, you know, or just a city that is always, people are busy and they're on the go and nobody has time to stop and say hello, you know, that can be a real thing that you're going to have to get used to, because it can be really frustrating. And you know, it's like the DMV or the post office experience, that can be like anywhere, just anywhere. Don't expect to get things done quickly.
And there's some really hardworking people that work for the city, but it's just the system that's set up is just, it just drags on, and it's slow and a lot of red tape, and unfortunately it's just something you have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have everything, right? Like, so if you want like the big easy, if you want it easy and people are pros at having a good time and chilling out and relaxing and just, stopping and smelling the roses and talking to each other. With that friendliness comes a price. And that heat. It's hard to move fast in that heat. It's slowing you down. So
another big reason you might not want to move to New Orleans is the tourists. And I think you probably have visited New Orleans if you're considering moving there as a tourist. And it's a lot of fun, and there's really some really cool things you can do. And the tourism industry does drive the local economy. But also as a local, you find once you get comfortable there and you start planning your routes, that tourists can start to wear on you.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword because a lot of us make our money off of tourism, especially people in the hospitality industry, which is a huge industry in New Orleans. You're grateful for that, but it's also, there are pockets. Once you become a local in New Orleans, you'll find your pocket in your neighborhood. A lot of people don't leave their neighborhoods as well because it's such a walkable city. So wherever you live, you're going to just stay in your hood, and just go to the grocery store, go to, the dentist, the spa, wherever you like to do, the gym. It's all right there for you.
Yeah. It's just a city that's known for debauchery and coming down and just throwing all your cares out the window. And so the tourists do tend to come in and, drink a beer and throw it on the ground and pee in the corner and whatever. That's just part of New Orleans. And as you're living there, it's a different experience than if you're just coming in for the weekend and leaving.
And that brings up a really good point. So when people think about New Orleans who aren't locals of New Orleans, the first thing you think about is the French Quarter, and Bourbon Street. That is not all of New Orleans. We live there. People are working professionals and have lives. They're not there to just lose their minds like, the rest of the world when they come in. So just keep that in mind, that there are a lot of different shades of New Orleans that will just blow your mind with the beauty and the peacefulness and, but there is that. And that would probably bring us to crime. There's crime. New Orleans has always been known for crime. And, it's just a common sense thing. It's not, you can't look at the people of New Orleans and be like, oh, they're all criminals. Think about it. We attract tourists who want to come to the city to lose their mind, right? There's a lot of drinking, a lot of partying going on. So therefore people are unconscious and they're just not, behaving in their natural right minds. So things happen, and there are people who will take advantage of you if you do that. But hopefully you're coming to live and be an upstanding citizen of the community and do business here and appreciate the beauty that New Orleans has to offer.
And crime can happen anywhere, but also just use some common sense and don't walk down dark streets alone or even in a small group. Just find ways that you're going to be around lighted areas, especially at night. Walk in large groups if you can, or at least be on the phone with someone if you're in a sketchy situation.
Also, you have to use common sense. There is crime everywhere, but I think we've talked too much about it. Find a really safe neighborhood. You can reach out to us and we will help you find that safe, wonderful, beautiful neighborhood. But yes, crime is a thing here. I don't know how it works wherever you live, but in New Orleans, when it comes to energy, there is basically a monopoly. You have to use energy, and a lot of people have a lot of problems with that, and rightfully so. So again, that's part of the city and the city officials, government, and the way that the city is run.
If you're coming from Texas to Louisiana, and Texas, there are hundreds of different energy companies that you can choose from, and it's deregulated, so you can really price shop here with New Orleans. You literally have one option, and whatever your bill is what your bill is. You don't really know if it's correct, but that's what you have to pay, or your power gets turned off. So it's a tough situation sometimes.
Again, everything is political, right? And there's a lot of that in New Orleans, being such a liberal city, but also being in a very conservative state. There's just a lot of that ickiness going on. So whether you're into that or not, just be aware that that's probably a con in most people's books. Oh, I do want to say something about, we've talked on and on about New Orleans being so slow paced, but one thing that can get done fast in New Orleans is your passport. You can get your passport really quickly in New Orleans. I don't know, maybe because of the port or whatever, but usually people have to wait about 2 weeks, so you can get yours in days. Like, I believe that my last passport I got in like 2 or 3 days. Okay, this might be a plus to you, but it might not be. Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras, to some of us, is just a huge pain. I mean, the whole city, you need to understand, it's not Mardi Gras where you're from or however you celebrate. You might celebrate the day, you might get a king cake and think you're doing something, right? But here, the city shuts down. Kids get out of school for 1 week, so be prepared for that. I don't know your relationship with your kids or how often you want them to be home, but kids get out of school for Mardi Gras, the whole city shuts down. And when that happens, you literally have to figure out how to get to work. Most of us, we don't commute very far. In New Orleans, like I said, it's very walkable. You probably live very close to, where you work. But it's a thing. I mean, to get across the bridge, you have to come home a certain way. You have to wait for the parades. And that might be something where you're like, that does not deserve to be on this list. But really and truly, some of us don't love Mardi Gras as much as most people do. But here's a really helpful hint. You can rent your place out if you're into that. You can make a lot of money during Mardi Gras and use that as vacation time for you and your family.
Yeah, a lot of locals, they'll maybe stay and go to one big event, but then they'll go out of town during Mardi Gras and rent out their home to make thousands of dollars potentially on the B&B rental of their property. But also, as she mentioned, there's definitely been times I've gone into a Target, for example, and within an hour they have a parade rolling down the street, and well, I'm not leaving for a few hours because there's literally no way to get out onto the street. So let's just be mindful if you stay in town that you're going to have to navigate in a different way. And, there's a lot of pluses too that we'll get into in other videos about that Mardi Gras time and how fun it can be. But definitely the traffic and the navigation during Mardi Gras is tough.
Yeah, if you don't have flexibility, you're probably not going to love living here. I mean, you have to stay on your toes to live here. There's not a set schedule. Every single day is going to be different and an adventure for you. So yeah, Mardi Gras might be a pro, might be a con. There was something about, the street parking. Here we go. Let's go back to when we said you should not have a nice car in New Orleans. There are a lot of residential homes that come with parking in a driveway. And I would highly recommend that, unless you have no problem with street parking, because it is backed up, especially the quarter. I never recommend anybody drive into the quarter. You definitely Uber it. It's so worth it. Get out the car or ride your bike. You can put your bike on to the city bus, or take the streetcar. But just don't drive into the city unless you absolutely have to. One, it's such a pain. You're going to be driving around forever looking for parking. And this isn't just the quarter, okay? This is like a lot of people have to park on the street. So some streets are really nice and wide, like Britannia is so beautiful, nice and wide, right? That's not so much an issue, but some streets are just really, really tiny and narrow. And then there's a pothole and, it's uneven. And so you've got to find that way to park into the little, what's that called? A little
I don't know
ditch.
The edge.
We're really selling you on New Orleans. I just want you to know the truth.
But with the narrow streets too, be mindful. If you have a nicer car, it might be prone to getting sideswiped or your mirrors getting clipped off.
Tuck them
Make sure you close those mirrors in, because always as driving, you'll see a couple cars with their mirrors hanging off. So if you're in a really narrow street, you'll see that happen. So just be careful.
And you'll have to, so that's another thing too. When you are driving, one, you have to understand, like, there might be a streetcar coming, right? So you can cross over. Streetcars will stop for you, so it's not like a train. So just,
they're definitely
just know that,
going.
like, whenever you're gonna turn, like if you're on St. Charles, right, and you're coming across 2 tracks, you'll just be able to treat them like a car in a way, right? But you just might get a little nervous if you're just stuck in the middle of it, but you're fine. But the big thing is when you're crossing a street and it's a very narrow road because of the so much street parking, right? You can't really see people coming to cross the street. You have to like roll your car as close to the street as you can without getting hit to make sure that nobody's coming, and then be able to, you know, look both ways and go, right? And avoid the pothole. But so it's kind of like, yeah, Grand Theft Auto, but just kidding. Ooh, we're really selling. Just move here without a car. We've talked about the shifting earth that we call New Orleans. Foundation issues. One, the homes are really old, a lot of them, and they're beautiful. But you might walk into a home and everything looks nice and renovated and new, but all of a sudden you just hit a little slope, you know, or a rolling hill. And it's just a lot of the homes do have foundational issues.
Yeah. And you'll see that a lot if you're buying a home. We can walk you through that process, or someone from our team can help you get somebody to analyze that and just make sure your foundation is going to be okay. But it is a very common problem, as these are not only older homes, but also with it being under sea level and all the water that we get, you can have some foundation issues.
Yeah, you know, and some people find that charming, and you might not be one of them, and that's why it's on the list. Also, if you're tall, a lot of these old homes, you know, people were a lot smaller back in the day. Food was a lot less available. So, you know, it's a thing. Like, some people don't fit in these little showers or through these closet doors. That's another thing. But for the general public, everybody squeezes in pretty well.
All right, and finally, the last reason you might not want to move to New Orleans is, drum roll,
the cockroaches! Wait, the flying cockroaches! Oh my god! Cockroaches, bad enough, right? But these things fly. I mean, they fly, and it's a thing, okay? And we grew up in Louisiana, okay? And it's a thing, and as you can see, it still freaks me out. But here's the thing, let's just take a deep breath. They're really not cockroaches. Really, technically, they're called water bugs, right? They're not the cockroaches that are like, ooh, you have an infestation of cockroaches because your house is dirty. These are like Mother Nature's, you know, last survivor. They're these huge water bugs, and they do fly. But here's the thing, in the city, it's not as much of a thing. So in New Orleans, you know, since we're talking about New Orleans specifically, it's not that bad. It's not like, oh my God, why would anybody live here, right? But in the country, I mean, it can happen. Like you will see them in the country, and it's
they're disgusting, and
they're so big,
and you know, in Texas there's some big cockroaches too, but
there's some crazy insects in the South, period.
Yeah,
you know, and in New Orleans and Texas and all that, you'll find these really interesting bugs, and I'm not a fan of insects, period. But
I mean, really, on that topic of bugs and cockroaches, there are a ton of things that we could talk about, but really I feel like I have something right now. But cockroaches, mosquitoes.
Oh, mosquitoes is a thing. That's a thing. Put that on your list of, you know, it's a thing. I mean, it's humid. Wherever there's going to be a lot of water, you know.
Really just critters in general. I mean, they're in the city. There are rats. There
are rats. We didn't bring that up. Gosh,
right.
I'm sorry, y'all.
So,
at least you waited till the end, see?
Not like thankful? Hundreds of them running the streets, but definitely I've seen some.
It's not like New York rats, because I've lived in New York, and that is fascinating. I mean, that is like, you know, if you're a rat, you want to live in New York. That's a thing.
I mean, if you've ever visited, then you probably have seen a lot of these things we've already talked about today, but living there on a day-to-day basis is a different experience. So these are just some reasons that you might not want to live in New Orleans. We do have other videos showing you all the reasons that you'll love New Orleans if you choose to move here.
Yes, and it greatly outweighs, obviously, it greatly outweighs the cons, the pros. I mean, New Orleans is such a beautiful city. You're not going to find anywhere in America that's as original and authentic. We don't have to try to be weird or strange or artistic. I mean, there's just so much beauty here. And so obviously we understand why you are attracted and considering moving to New Orleans. But after all of that, if you're still wanting to move to New Orleans, then you might be tough enough to actually move here and love it. And if so, we'd love it if you reached out to us. We can answer all of your questions, really take care of you, and show you around town and put you in the right neighborhood. That is really going to just make your soul sing.
Yeah, you can give us a call, text us, email us. All the information is in the description below.
And if you're not sold, check out this video of all the reasons why you want to definitely move to New Orleans. Yeah?